All right, guys, ready? 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 Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to call this hearing to order. Welcome, one and all. Our hearing today is focused, as you know, on two pieces of bipartisan nuclear energy legislation. Senator Capito and I meet most every week, either in person or virtually, with our staff directors, both minority and majority, and we talk about, among other things, the hearing schedules. What should we hold hearings on? I want to thank Senator Capito for suggesting that we have a hearing, at least one hearing, here early this year that focuses on the major source of carbon-free electricity in this country of ours, and that is nuclear power. Today, we're going to re-examine the American Nuclear Infrastructure Act. This legislation is sponsored by our ranking members, Senator Capito, along with Senators Whitehouse, soon to be a grandfather, I understand, Senator Crapo, Senator Booker, and our former chairman, Senator John Barrasso. We're also going to discuss the sensible, timely relief for America's nuclear district's economic development. There's got to be an acronym in that. Senator Duckworth, what would be a good acronym for a bill like that?
It's called the Stranded Act for stranded fuel.
Whoever came up with that, I take my hat off to. I'm not big for acronyms, but this is a pretty good one. Sensible, timely relief for America's nuclear district's economic development, Stranded Act for short, and it'll become clear as we go through this hearing what we mean by stranded. But thank you for introducing the legislation along with, I think, Senator Collins, and for leading us on this important issue. As we consider the merits, if you will, of both bills, we're fortunate to have an expert panel of witnesses joining us, and we want to thank each of you for your willingness to be part of this discussion. The numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. As I said earlier, nuclear energy is by far the largest source of reliable, clean energy in our country, generating over half of our nation's carbon-free electricity. Nuclear power plays a critical role in our efforts to address the climate crisis while also creating economic opportunity. Right across the river, the Delaware River from us in Delaware, are a couple of nuclear power plants. I think each of them employ close to 1,000 people, well-paid, highly trained workforce. To that end, today's hearing is an important opportunity to explore how we can help the U.S. energy industry safely develop the technologies that are necessary to meet our climate goals while also lowering energy costs and boosting economic development across our country. And with regard to the American Nuclear Infrastructure Act, my hope is that we can build upon and improve the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, which became law in 2019, as you may recall, thanks to the bipartisan work of this committee, including people sitting on either side of me. That act required the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to create a new regulatory infrastructure for the next generation of nuclear power. This new structure is moving us closer to making advanced nuclear power a reality in this country, and doing so without jeopardizing safety, but actually enhancing safety. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not only on time when it comes to meeting its statutory requirements to develop a new framework for licensing advanced reactor. The Commission is currently ahead of schedule. And I understand they're ahead of schedule by as much as 3 years, which is pretty impressive. With that thought in mind, I think we ought to be careful not to make unnecessary changes to the regulatory process that could undermine this progress as long as they continue to make this kind of progress ahead of schedule. Still, it's been difficult for the NRC to operate under the constraints that the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act requires. In December, NRC Chairman Hansen testified before this committee and expressed concerns about the impact of budgetary caps on the agency's ability to hire the workforce of the future and take on the challenges of licensing advanced reactor technologies. We know that for the NRC to do its job effectively, including processing license applications in a timely manner, the NRC must be adequately resourced. And as we work to improve this legislation, I would like for us to ensure that the NRC has the support it needs to continue its safety message and to hire the best and brightest needed to work on the next generation of nuclear reactors, which I believe we badly need in this country of ours. And I know a number of members of our committee on both sides of the aisle agree with that. While the next generation of nuclear technology presents new opportunities for clean energy and job creation, I'm also all too aware of the economic difficulties facing many nuclear facilities today and the challenges that closing a facility can create for surrounding communities and the families that live in those communities. Not unlike auto factories and other advanced manufacturing facilities, when we lost in our state, about 10, 12 years ago, we lost 2 auto plants. At one time, they employed as many as 3,000 people in each plant. We lost them both at the bottom of the Great Recession. We know how devastating that can be for the families and for the communities and for the state. We've seen that in Delaware firsthand. The loss of highly skilled, good-paying jobs oftentimes leads to smaller tax bases, to reduced revenues for local businesses, and to depressed housing values. At the same time, these communities are also unfairly burdened with the cost of nuclear waste storage. Senator Duckworth's Stranded Act would benefit those communities that are working to move past the legacy of their decommissioned nuclear plants and to create a brighter, more prosperous future for their residents. As my colleagues have oftentimes heard me say, I believe that one of the primary roles of government is to help create a nurturing environment for job creation and job preservation. I think everybody on this committee agrees with that. The Stranded Act would do just that. And I commend Senator Duckworth and her staff for their commitment to these communities and her work on this bipartisan bill. She'll be speaking following Senator Capito's opening remarks. In closing, I believe that we have an opportunity to help our nation's nuclear energy industry transition into the future while reducing carbon emissions and creating economic opportunities at home as a result. As we make that transition, it's imperative that we prioritize safety and equity. We look forward to hearing the unique perspectives of our witnesses today. Before we do, and before I return to housing member Senator Capito for opening statement, let me just close with this thought. A number of the members are committing, particularly Senator Duckworth, who served our country in uniform with great courage and great sacrifice. But I spent a few years of my life in the Navy. Used to chase from airplanes and nuclear submarines. And as a father, I remember you taking our Boy Scout troop down to Norfolk Naval Station about every 3 years. And we would visit ships, submarines, aircraft carriers, including the Teddy Roosevelt. And I'll never forget, we had about 25 scouts one weekend and about a decade ago, and we met with the captain of the ship up on the bridge. And the captain of the ship welcomed us and welcomed the scouts warmly. We had about 25 scouts, maybe a half dozen or so scout leaders. And I'll never forget what he said to the scouts. He said, the Teddy Roosevelt is 1,000 feet long. The boys went, ooh. The Teddy Roosevelt is, I think he said, 40 stories high. And the scouts went, ooh. And he said, and the Teddy Roosevelt has about 5,000 men and women who serve on the ship. And the scouts went, ooh. And then he said, the Teddy Roosevelt has something like 75 aircraft and helicopters on board. And the Boy Scouts went, ooh. And then he said that Teddy Roosevelt stops to refuel once every 25 years. And the adults went, ooh. That is, the last time we lost an American sailor aboard a nuclear-powered ship, submarine, or aircraft carrier, never. We've never lost one. You can do this stuff safely, and we've shown that in the Navy and other ways as well. Senator Capito, thank you so much for your leadership in this arena and for letting me be your wingman on what I think is an incredibly important issue. And again, Senator Duckworth, I'll turn to you right after Senator Capito. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the witnesses for being with us here today, both in person and virtually, and looking forward to this hearing. We know, as the chairman has said, that nuclear energy is an integral part of a clean energy system, a reliable one. It generates carbon-free power around the clock for up to 2 years before you even need to refuel. And I guess same with an aircraft carrier, only 25 years, I guess, is much longer. Nuclear energy must remain a part of America's diverse energy portfolio now and in the future. State and local governments are realizing the benefits of preserving and expanding the use of nuclear energy. Last year, Illinois extended its law to keep the state's existing nuclear power plants online. Other states with no existing nuclear reactors, such as Wyoming, Kentucky, and Montana, are opening the door to deploy new nuclear plants. And just last week, the West Virginia legislature voted to allow new nuclear development in our state, and our governor signed that bill into law yesterday. Nuclear energy can provide a tremendous potential opportunity for economic growth, particularly in communities impacted by the closure of coal plants, but still have developed sites and transmission assets that could accommodate new generation. In this way, development of nuclear energy would build on West Virginia's long history of providing baseload energy that fuels our economy. Congress should build on previous bipartisan legislation to continue to promote safe use and development of nuclear energy nationwide. That's why I introduced American Nuclear Infrastructure Act with our Democrat lead, Senator Whitehouse, along with Senators Barrasso, Booker, and Crapo. Since introduction, Senators Graham and Manchin have also joined as co-sponsors. The committee passed substantially the same legislative text last year, I believe, with bipartisan support by 16-5 in this committee. I thank Senator Whitehouse for his leadership on nuclear issues and his partnership on this legislation. Current events serve as a reminder of the importance of this bill. International turmoil threatens to disrupt our nuclear fuel supply chain. New England generated a quarter of its electricity by burning fuel oil during a cold snap just last month. That follows the closure of 2 of New England's 3 nuclear plants in recent years. Meanwhile, China continues to build new nuclear reactors. China is poised to overtake France as the world's second-largest operator of nuclear power plants. This legislation would strengthen America's international nuclear energy leadership, supporting deployment at home and making us more competitive in markets abroad. The bill incentivizes the deployment of advanced nuclear technologies for innovative purposes. It modernizes outdated nuclear restriction. It encourages using advanced manufacturing and construction techniques to build nuclear power plants safer, faster, and cheaper. I look forward to working with Chairman Carper and other members of the committee to advance this legislation, as we have other bipartisan legislation already in this Congress. On a separate but related note, concerning this committee's oversight efforts, in order to realize nuclear energy's economic, national security, and environmental benefits, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission must be prepared to review and approve advanced nuclear designs and licenses in a timely and collaborative manner to get new generation assets onto the field. EPW members on both sides have extensively supported efforts to develop and deploy these new nuclear technologies. Signed into law in 2019, the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, which this committee developed, directed the NRC to review and update the agency's practice to efficiently consider new reactor applications. Over the last few years, members of this on both sides of the aisle in this committee, myself included, have repeatedly asked the NRC if the Commission needs any additional authorities or resources for its advanced regulatory work. In December, I asked NRC Chairman Hansen whether the Commission is currently prepared to review license applications under the existing regulatory framework. He assured me that the Commission was ready. Yet approximately 1 week later, the NRC staff denied the only application actively under review to construct and operate an advanced reactor. This decision is concerning and clearly does not align with what the chairman told me. I recognize that the licensing process is a two-way street. It requires an engaged applicant as well as an engaged NRC staff. Congress has provided substantial public investment to assist the deployment of these new technologies. Nuclear innovators and entrepreneurs need to be confident that the NRC will review applications in a timely, predictable, efficient, and affordable manner. That is why I asked the GAO to assess NRC's preparedness to review and approve advanced nuclear applications. GAO's review should also consider the Commission and senior NRC staff's process to oversee these licensing reviews. Additionally, Commission leadership is critically important to successfully managing these important projects. I've said before, leadership is strengthened when the Commission operates with a full complement of 5 members. For more than 7 months, the Commission has operated with only 3 members, and I again urge President Biden to promptly put forth a bipartisan pairing of qualified individuals to fill these vacancies, and Chairman Carper and I have joined in that request. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing, and with that, I would yield back.
Senator Capito, thank you for that statement and really for your leadership here. We like to work across the aisle on all kinds of issues, and this is certainly one that we have and continue to do so, and it's important that we do. Senator Duckworth, my mom raised my sister and me to believe and practice the golden rule, treat other people the way we want to be treated. When I look at the work that you've done on Stranded and other communities, whether it be coal communities, where they lost jobs, lost economic opportunity, I feel we have a moral obligation to help them and put ourselves in their shoes. And your legislation just really is built on that premise. So thank you. You're recognized. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito for holding this hearing on my bipartisan bill, the Stranded Act. My co-sponsor, Senator Collins, is not on the committee, but she sends her support of the Stranded Act and our need to get this bill passed and these communities the support that they need. As this committee will learn today from my constituents in the city of Zion, Illinois, there is a desperate need to pass the Stranded Act as soon as possible. However, our bipartisan proposal is not a new or radical idea. We're simply seeking to fulfill a promise Congress made 40 years ago, 4 decades ago, when it passed the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982. I was still in high school. This law recognized that we need to safely dispose of and store nuclear waste in the interim. The federal government has a responsibility to help communities manage the decommissioning of a nuclear power plant. Specifically, Congress authorized assistance payments to help stranded communities to mitigate the social and economic impacts of being stuck with spent nuclear waste. Yet, to this day, communities like Zion have not received their assistance. Instead, the city of Zion has lost hundreds of jobs and millions in tax revenue and have deprived of the valuable lakefront property that could be the base for future economic growth. That was never the deal. The federal government and nuclear industry promised communities like Zion that in exchange for their patriotic efforts to help our nation generate zero emissions power, they would not only receive jobs and economic growth, but ultimately the nuclear plants would be decommissioned, the waste safely removed, and the land returned for future use. Now, I recognize that a long-term storage solution will not be solved overnight. However, that is no excuse to abandon my constituents in Zion and Americans throughout the country. The social and economic impacts of having an industry leave overnight are brutal, no matter the industry. But when a company abandons a community and leaves behind 2.2 million pounds of toxic spent nuclear waste sitting on 90 acres of lakefront property on Lake Michigan, well, the impact is simply devastating. And this situation is not unique to Illinois. I have a chart here. As indicated on this map, this Congressional Research Service has identified 80 sites, that's 80 sites, that store nuclear spent fuel around the country. Additionally, 25 of those sites are geographically distinct stranded nuclear waste storage sites, meaning a site where spent nuclear fuel is stored but lacks an operating reactor generating power and revenue. And as you can see, these sites know no politics. They're all across the country in red and blue states. Sadly and shockingly, despite the nuclear sites across the country being part of our national infrastructure and part of our energy lifeline, there is currently no federal program to assist these communities with social economic recovery. In fact, the majority of the federal funding to these nuclear sites have been furnished by litigation settlements and court judgments. This is no way to do business. The U.S. Economic Development Administration's Nuclear Closure Communities, NCC, initiative provides some support, but in its current form, the help is only for new construction or development projects. Of course, stranded communities like Zion, financing new construction is of little use when the very stranded nuclear waste have resulted on their loss of tax-based jobs and land needed to keep the lights on. It's a downward spiral. I hope to offer a substitute amendment to the Stranded Act during a future markup that will build on the EDA's NCC program by improving it to provide the type of support communities like Zion desperately need now. The Stranded Act contains 3 pillars. First, the non-competitive economic impact grants will provide financial assistance to local governments where a nuclear power plant is located. The affected local governments are eligible to receive amounts valued at up to $15 for each kilogram of spent nuclear fuel stored in the affected community, a payment framework established under the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982. We're not even using 2022 dollars. We are pegging this at the rate set in 1982 of $15 per kilogram. Second, the Innovative Solution Prize Competition will award prizes for proposals for affected communities to carry out alternatives to nuclear facilities, generating sites and waste sites, giving them another chance at economic development through innovative proposals. Finally, this bill would create a stranded nuclear waste task force to conduct a study on existing public and private resources for these affected communities and develop immediate and long-term economic adjustment plans tailored to the needs of each of the affected communities. We cannot rely on communities to give us power, then leave them to be our active nuclear dumpsters. The United States government must help these communities that powered our lives to survive another day, and passing the Stranded Act would be a first step towards fulfilling a commitment we made to these patriotic communities long ago. Of course, the inspiration to write the Stranded Act stemmed from a visit to the city of Zion during my first year in the Senate, and I'm honored that the mayor of Zion, Billy McKinney, is here in support of the hearing. Hi, Mr. Mayor. And to have David Knable, the city's administrator and director of accounts and finance, here as our witness to give stranded communities like theirs our voice. Mr. Knable was born and raised in Zion, Illinois, and knows firsthand how stranded nuclear waste negatively impacts surrounding communities. After graduating from the University of Wisconsin Parkside in 1999, followed by a CPA certification in 2008, Mr. Knable went on to obtain 14 years of experience in public accounting. Throughout his 10 years working for the city of Zion, he has championed several high-profile projects to assist Zion with its financial needs and worked hard to address the impacts of a nuclear power plant closure by working with legislators across the country, the results of which will be a template for other communities to use for nuclear waste storage, valuation, and redevelopment. Mr. Knable and Mayor McKinney, while this is a less than ideal situation, we are so fortunate to have you here today to share your story with us. And I look forward to hearing Mr. Knable's testimony on behalf of the city of Zion. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Senator Duckworth, thanks so much for your leadership on this and for bringing in one of our witnesses. This is an aside to my colleagues. City of Zion, yeah, I read that. I said, well, that could be in Israel. And in Delaware, if you get off I-95 in Delaware, take a Route 1 and head for our beaches, one of them is Rehoboth, which means room for all. But you go through a town, a little community called, it's called Little Heaven. Little Heaven, I thought, well, so we could have a panel with somebody from Little Heaven, the city of Zion, and it might be almost like a revival. That would be good. Very good. Jim, how are you? Senator Whitehouse has asked for a chance to say some words here, and I'm happy to recognize Sheldon. Go ahead. Thank you for your leadership.
On our biblical theme, let me just say that Rhode Island has Galilee, which is
it just gets better and better.
Where our fishing port is located.
Amen.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, our current climate goal of net zero by 2050 may or may not be adequate, but whether it's adequate or not, we are not going to get there without nuclear energy. Advanced nuclear reactors are safer. They can operate longer without refueling. They can run on spent nuclear fuel, very important consideration.
Would you say that last part again? That's worth emphasizing.
They can run on spent nuclear fuel.
There you go.
They have a smaller geographical footprint that makes them easier to deploy. They can be standard design for safety. And in some cases, they produce high temperatures that can be used for separate industrial processes. I support the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in establishing a regulatory framework for advanced reactors by engaging with stakeholders to create a usable and workable final rule. Putting an advanced reactor through the current licensing process is like putting a Tesla through a regulatory procedure that requires the testing of its carburetor. I introduced the ANIA bill last July with Senators Capito, Barrasso, Booker, and Crapo, and as the ranking member, Senator Capito, the Republican lead on this bill, mentioned, Senators Manchin and Graham have joined us. I would also note the positive development that the bipartisan infrastructure law created a program to support existing nuclear generators, which suffer competitive disadvantage because they get no revenue for the carbon-free benefit that they provide. ANIA further supports investment in our current fleet and in future technology, and I'll emphasize again the importance of a focus on repurposing spent fuel. We cannot overlook that potential benefit. ANIA includes prizes for the first reactors licensed by NRC in 3 different categories. One of these categories is for a reactor that can productively reuse spent nuclear fuel. ANIA helps local communities affected by nuclear closures and assists with cleaning up legacy abandoned mining sites on tribal lands. I'll close by providing a personal hello and thank you to Armand Cohen, one of our witnesses today, who is coming to us from London. Armand and I worked together back in the 1980s on the first conservation-based electric rates for an American utility, Rhode Island's own then little Narragansett Electric, now lost in the enormous national grid system. But we did good work together way back when, and I'm delighted that he's here with us today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks for your steadfast leadership on this. It's been just so important. In the 1980s, did you say? You guys?
We were first.
Yeah, that was when you were young Sheldon.
Yeah, that would be then.
Still young. All right. I think that does it for our members' statements. And now we're going to turn to our witnesses. Our first one is Mr. Nabel. Do I have that pronounced correctly, Mr. Nabel?
You do have that. Thank you very much for that.
Good. And today, I think Mr. Nabel's joined by Armand. Do you pronounce your name? I've never heard it. Armand. How do you pronounce it?
Armand is correct. Thank you.
All right, good. And Maria Korsnik, I think Armand is the Executive Director of the Clean Air Task Force, as we've heard. Maria Korsnik is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Energy Institute. And Jeremy Harrell is the Chief Strategy Officer at ClearPath Action. We are delighted that you've all joined us in some cases live and in person, in other cases virtually. But if Mr. Nabel, if you would lead us off, that'd be great. Then please proceed with your testimony. The entire testimony may be made part of the record. Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and distinguished members of the committee. On behalf of Mayor McKinney, our City Council, our community, and all communities in our situation, I appreciate your time today. The City of Zion is located on the shores of Lake Michigan in northeast Illinois, just minutes from the Wisconsin border, and is home to 24,655 people. It was also home to the Zion Nuclear Power Station from 1974 to 1998, where it provided power to Chicago and the northern quarter of Illinois. The plant brought thousands of jobs to the community, contributed heftily to the local economy, and was crucial to the foundation that helped the city thrive during those years. Residents of Zion, myself included, grew up with the two cooling towers being in their family photos at the beach and part of the city's skyline. It was just a part of life in Zion. We trusted that those responsible for the plant were monitoring the risks and keeping us safe. We accepted that the plant was part of our landscape, knowing that the jobs kept food on the table of Zion residents and many others. We understood that the plant that kept the lights on in tens of thousands of homes, extending far beyond our city's borders, and it was for the greater good. Unfortunately, that came to an abrupt end when ComEd decided they could not justify the necessary safety upgrades to continue to produce competitively priced power and decided to permanently close the plant. The community was totally blindsided, as this was well in advance of the slated expiration of their license in 2013. Almost overnight, the plant closed, the jobs disappeared, and the lakefront and city were permanently blighted. Those who had been part of our city for decades were gone, and we were left wondering if those that had watched out for us would continue to do so. Whether those from beyond our borders who had benefited from the risks the city had taken would be there to help us in our time of need. Would anyone care that we were left as a nuclear waste storage site? Now, over 2.5 decades later, with 2.2 million pounds of nuclear waste sitting in our city only 400 yards from the shore of Lake Michigan, we now know that answer. At the time of closure in 1998, the Zion Nuclear Power Station provided almost $19 million annually in property taxes to support the local schools, city services, and other governmental entities that the public relied upon. The historical value in taxes collected are shown in attachment 1 provided. The plant made up over half of our entire tax base. When that foundation disappeared from our tax base, it did nothing to reduce the cost of education to our students, nor did it reduce the cost of our police, fire, rescue, and infrastructure. The service demands of the public remained steady, but therefore the burden that was largely paid by the plant now shifted to those residents and businesses, resulting in an immediate 30% increase in their tax bills. There was little to no value in the now vacant plant, and there was no opportunity to replace that tax base with redevelopment on what would normally be 90 acres of lakefront property, as shown in attachment 2 provided. This resulted in a cycle which continues to this day of property values dropping as a result of taxes significantly increasing. Property values became so depressed that large landlord groups were buying 40 to 50 homes at a time to rent out. Many of these groups failed to maintain these properties while they collected their cash flow, and then they moved on to the next. At the peak, over 60% of our housing stock were rental properties, which is triple that of a healthy community. The demand on our schools and city services skyrocketed while our resources continued to dwindle. The tax rate over the 20 years since closure almost tripled while the plant was decommissioned and the waste remained on our lake shore in the heart of our community. That brings us to where we're at today with over 2.2 million pounds of nuclear waste stranded in our backyard next to a lake that provides drinking water for over 10 million people, the location of which is shown in attachment 3. Ours is not an isolated case. There are over 30 reactors that have been or are in the process of decommissioning, and another 56 currently operating in 28 states. Many of the senators on the committee are or will be facing this exact same issue. It's clear that a resolution in nuclear storage needs to be addressed, but that is not for me to address the solution, nor is it the issue before us today. That answer has been debated for decades. However, until a decision is reached, we are the end solution. We have become, against our will, a nuclear storage site, and the community of Zion has been irreparably damaged without recognition and without compensation. We humbly ask that Congress help to start to repair those damages with this legislation. This is not a new concept for Congress. As Senator Duckworth mentioned, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982 was passed with strong bipartisan support and recognized that there should be an impact assistance payments to units of local government to, quote, mitigate social or economic impacts occasioned by the establishment and subsequent operation of any interim storage site. Congress has acknowledged again in 2020 that assistance was essential to nuclear closure communities with the adoption of the EDA Nuclear Closure Communities Program. However, that program required us to inflate our budget with matching dollars that we don't have for projects that would not address our inability to compete and recover. We've become very good at being fiscally responsible and do not want to spend funds unless it would address the crisis we're facing. The Stranded Act of 2022 fixes these limitations and provides us that opportunity by permitting us to address the inequities of our local tax base and begin to dig out of the hole that the plant closure put us into. Not asking for a handout, but rather to just be able to survive. We are a prideful city and want to be self-sufficient. However, over 20 years of fighting this battle alone, it's left us impossible to do so. Our goal is to utilize this funding to address our tax base issues and make it possible to compete to attract residents and businesses to our community and begin the rebuilding process. All of these plants across the United States produce nearly 20% of the country's electrical needs. We ask that while the people of the nation might not acknowledge us when their lights turn on, that they do remember us before ours turn off forever. It's for the greater good. Again, I appreciate your time today.
Mr. Cohen, thanks a million for coming here today. And Senator Duckworth, thank you for inviting him to join us and speak. Now we're going to turn to Maria Korsnik. Again, Maria is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Energy Institute. And with that, Maria, you are recognized. Take it away. Thank you.
I think it's Armand Cohen next.
Ah.
Whatever order you'd like to do.
He has.
Okay, thank you. All right. In that case, Maria, just cool your jets, and we'll wait for you for a few minutes. Armand, Executive Director of Clean Air Task Force, please proceed, Armand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and thank you, Senator Whitehouse, for the shout out. You've been a great leader on clean energy issues, and I would note that when we worked together 30 years ago on energy efficiency, climate change wasn't really front and center like it is today. And what's so interesting is that even in the 18 months since I testified before this committee last, there's been an enormous change in recognition of the problem of climate change. Countries representing about 90% of world GDP and CO2 emissions have now committed to varying degrees to a net zero energy system to be achieved over the next few decades. Actually, regardless of what happens in Washington, more than half of US electricity sales taking place today are taking place in states or in utility service territories that have a net zero emissions commitment by mid-century. So that's, you could say that's the easy part. Now the hard part is how do we actually achieve those goals in time and at an affordable cost. Nuclear energy could be a very significant contributor to success in meeting those goals, and our view is it could indeed be essential. It can serve as a powerful complement to increasingly inexpensive renewable energy and energy storage by providing zero carbon electricity and heat with 90% plus availability year-round, independent of season and weather. Nuclear energy also provides energy in a relatively compact land area, which is increasingly important in a crowded world. In addition to providing electricity to power the grid, nuclear can also power high temperature electrolysis to help provide zero carbon fuels like hydrogen, which today serve about 80% of world energy demand. Interestingly, also in the last 18 months, the value of nuclear energy has become increasingly recognized across the country by opinion leaders and by the general U.S. public, as is supported by some of the polling and thought leadership pieces that are contained in my testimony. That said, there are many challenges to a meaningful scale-up of nuclear, from tens of gigawatts a year to hundreds of gigawatts a year, which is what we're going to need if it's going to make a meaningful contribution to climate change mitigation. Costs need to come down, deployment has to speed up, key issues around nuclear waste disposal need to be resolved, and advanced reactor designs can help on all those fronts. But so can just best practices in manufacturing, business model, and licensing, as well as novel deployment strategies like utilizing and repurposing existing fossil fuel mining and electricity production sites, as Senator Capito referred to. Now, also in the last 2 years, Congress has done enormous good in this area with bipartisan legislation like NAICA, NAIMA, the 2020 Energy Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of last year, but more needs to be done. In my testimony, I highlight 4 areas for improvement and addition to making nuclear a real option. First of all is providing incentives for cost-effective scale-up of multiple units of advanced nuclear energy designs beyond initial demonstration to achieve scale and lower costs. And that's important. Demonstrating first of kind is good, but it's to really get the scale and cost reductions that we need, we're going to really need to build in series. That's what every nation that's had a successful low-cost nuclear energy program has demonstrated. Second, we need supporting licensing processes that are appropriate for advanced reactor designs, both in the U.S. and activities or licensing activities that will support diffusion of U.S. designed reactors globally. Third, we need to fundamentally reset U.S. nuclear spent fuel policy in the direction of community-driven, consent-based siting policies. Recently, Finland and Sweden have demonstrated that you can site a permanent nuclear waste repository if you take this consent-based approach. And we're going to need to take a step back and figure out how to do that in this country. And then finally, we can look at the possibility of using existing retired or retiring fossil fuel sites for siting advanced nuclear. So those are 4 immediate areas for attention. I'm happy to discuss further in Q&A. And once again, I really appreciate the opportunity to testify remotely. This was a business trip that had been planned some months ago, so I appreciate your accommodation to let me testify by video. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Cohen, we're delighted you could join us. Thank you for that enlightening testimony. Now, we're going to turn to Maria Korsnik. Again, Maria is still the president and chief executive officer of the Nuclear Energy Institute, and she'll be followed by Jeremy Harrell. Ms. Korsnik, please proceed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Carper and Ranking Member Capito. My thanks to you and the rest of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. It's really my pleasure to be here. The Nuclear Energy Institute represents more than 300 companies across the country, including companies that own or operate nuclear power plants, reactor designers, advanced technology companies, and labor unions. Together, we're working to provide the clean, reliable, and affordable electric system of the future. On behalf of those member companies, I thank this committee for its continued support of nuclear carbon-free energy and the thoughtful legislation that we're here to discuss today. Nuclear technology is American technology, from the first commercial plant built in the 1950s to the new reactor designs that, thanks to congressional support, are moving from design to demonstration to deployment. The United States has long been the global leader in nuclear technology. Our innovation and leadership have never been more important. The world is at an inflection point. The climate crisis requires swift action to mitigate the worst impacts of a changing climate. And the urgency to act is finally catching up to the urgency of the climate crisis. We have no shortage of high-level plans. Executing them depends on our choices. The stakes could not be higher. We need to prepare for a future that demands smarter, more reliable, and more efficient energy solutions. And nuclear energy is the key to meeting our clean energy goals while ensuring our electric system remains reliable. We're moving towards alignment in support of nuclear's role in terms of policy, in terms of industry commitments, and in terms of interest from investors and consumers. Many states, including Illinois, New Jersey, and New York, have taken steps to preserve their existing nuclear generation. And other states, including West Virginia and Wyoming, are taking steps to consider new nuclear for their future energy needs. Preserving existing reactors offers us many years of additional carbon-free electricity, while supporting SMRs and advanced reactors promises to unlock potentially game-changing growth in U.S. nuclear new builds, both domestically and abroad. And this isn't just about reliable carbon-free energy. It's also about creating hundreds of thousands of American jobs. I appear before you today in support of the American Nuclear Infrastructure Act. The legislation you're considering contains many provisions that will protect current carbon-free generation and maintain U.S. global leadership in a technology necessary for the decarbonization of economies around the world. ANEA originally conceived of preserving nuclear by enabling EPA to provide payments to economically challenged nuclear plants. This idea continued to evolve and was included in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed into law last fall, and we are grateful for the committee's leadership on this issue. This program can help to prevent millions of tons of CO2 emissions while supporting cost-effective and reliable electricity for millions of Americans. Further, ANEA accelerates nuclear energy innovation by providing 3 prizes to advanced reactor designs that complete the NRC licensing process. Navigating the regulatory process is expensive and time-consuming and creates additional difficulties in securing financing. This unique approach will help accelerate the development and deployment of new nuclear. By creating incentives that reduce and remove these burdens, nuclear innovation can flourish. And finally, ANEA takes a direct approach to bolstering U.S. leadership in nuclear energy by empowering the NRC to focus on nuclear energy export and innovation activities. This is a major step forward in leveling the playing field for U.S. companies competing with state-sponsored enterprises internationally. The actions outlined in ANEA are not only a critical step in decarbonization and enhancing U.S. leadership, but they are also necessary to combat climate change and protect our national security interests. The committee is also considering the Stranded Act, designed to address one of the hurdles that remains to fully realizing the value of nuclear power. NEI is supportive of federal efforts to satisfy its long overdue obligation to remove the used nuclear fuel from nuclear power plant sites. And as Congress explores options to address this community impact, we support action that advances a durable solution for used fuel management. I thank the committee for its work to preserve America's largest source of carbon-free power and to support the development and deployment of new nuclear technologies. Nuclear energy is critical to achieving a just transition to a clean energy future, and many of the provisions in ANEA are positive steps towards that future. NEI, on behalf of our members, pledge to work with you to help us get there. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Ms. Korsnik, thank you for your valuable testimony. It's great to see you. Welcome and thank you, and our best to everyone at the Institute. Finally, batting cleanup is Jeremy Harrell. Jeremy is the Chief Strategy Officer at Clear Path Action. And Jeremy, welcome you today, and you are recognized to give us your testimony. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, looks good. Good morning, Chairman Carper, Ranking Member Capito, and members of the committee. My name is Jeremy Harrell, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at ClearPath Action. We advance policies to accelerate breakthrough innovations that reduce emissions in the energy and industrial sectors. Additionally, I represent the U.S. Nuclear Industry Council as the chairman of its board. Clean energy and climate is regularly top of mind here in Washington, as well for many of your constituents. While there's no silver bullet that will solve the urgent climate challenge, accelerating the global deployment of American advanced nuclear reactors will significantly reduce emissions and meet growing energy needs. The International Energy Agency projects nuclear generation needs to double by 2050 to meet net zero emission goals. Dozens of American entrepreneurs developing advanced nuclear technologies are racing towards that cause, and the Bipartisan American Nuclear Infrastructure Act could help unlock their deployment at scale. I want to underscore 3 key points in my testimony today. First, advanced nuclear is here now. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission could receive roughly 10 new license applications before 2025, all looking to build advanced reactors over the next decade. Today's NRC is not equipped to effectively conduct those reviews. Second, the world's clean energy future requires nuclear energy, as illustrated by the IEA's projections. The only real question is, will it be American nuclear or will it be Chinese or Russian? And finally, the American Nuclear Infrastructure Act is the natural next step in a series of big legislative wins spearheaded by leaders at this very committee. ANIA can ensure that advanced nuclear meets its potential, contributing immensely to global security, economic growth, and emissions reductions. We're truly at an exciting time for the American nuclear industry. Nuclear power has reemerged as a smart, reliable power source and an integral part of global emission reduction efforts. A flurry of next-generation nuclear reactor companies, including Oklo, X-Energy, TerraPower, GE, Kairos, and NuScale, are all on the cusp of building reactors in the next decade. These technologies provide clean, reliable power and create jobs in local communities, but also offer additional benefits relative to traditional reactors. Advanced reactors are smaller, which allow them to be sited in new locations, can operate flexibly to complement renewable energy, are walk-away safe, and can decarbonize industries beyond the power sector with their high-temperature steam and heat. In other words, these technologies are a new breed of reactor, much different than the fleet the NRC has regulated for nearly 50 years, and many of the NRC's existing requirements are not relevant to these new designs. 2 Congresses ago, this committee wisely enacted the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, otherwise known as NEMA, directing the NRC to prepare for the licensing of advanced reactors. Advanced reactor companies are ready now, but the NRC is not. Oklo, for example, the first advanced reactor company to submit a license application to the NRC, recently had its application rejected. NuScale, the first small modular reactor, took 5 years and $500 million to get its design certification. There will always be hiccups for first movers, but that cannot become the norm for the review of new technologies. The NRC must modernize its processes to unlock the potential of these companies rather than add layers of unnecessary and overly burdensome regulations. Licensing is a necessary step between the development of new designs and commercialization. And if America is not proactive, the U.S. could fail to meet its own clean energy pledges while also losing ground to China and Russia on technological innovation. Which leads me to my next point on the global picture. Climate change is an urgent global challenge that merits significant action at every level of government and the private sector. While the U.S. and few others have reversed emissions trajectories, much of the rest of the world is growing their emissions as they grow their populations, their industries, and their quality of life. We need an American, innovation-focused approach to solve the global climate challenge. As I mentioned earlier, nuclear generation will need to at least double globally by 2050 to meet carbon neutrality goals, meaning new nuclear capacity additions, in addition to what we already have operating, need to reach 30 gigawatts per year by the early 2030s. That's the annual equivalent of enough electricity for 20 million households. That's daunting, but it's also a huge opportunity. Nearly 50 countries are projected to have markets for advanced nuclear before 2050, a more than $360 billion annual market opportunity for the American supply chain. And make no mistake about it, if the U.S. does not seize that opportunity, China and Russia will. So how does the U.S. seize this moment? Thankfully, Congress has recognized the importance of nuclear energy. Significant bipartisan legislation has been passed, providing both robust support for the existing civilian fleet and for the R&D of nascent nuclear technologies. Now, Congress must provide the direction needed to ensure there's a clear path for the next generation to be licensed, cited, and permitted. The American Nuclear Infrastructure Act contains several provisions in this very vein. These policies include prizes to offset initial licensing costs for first movers, continued regulatory modernization, preemptive environmental review of key federal facilities, and broader international collaboration and investments. In addition to these important provisions, there are other areas the bill could be improved. The committee should look to expand the modernization efforts in NEMA, provide additional financial flexibility to grow the workforce of the future, catalyze a next generation of American nuclear fuels, and further streamline permitting at brownfield sites, like former power plants. ClearPath Action looks forward to offering our support to this effort. Thank you for the opportunity today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Harrell, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your testimony as well. I'm going to lead off the questioning, and next will be Senator Capito. Senator Whitehouse is next in order, but he has had to step away for a while, and if he doesn't return immediately, then Senator Inhofe, you will follow Senator Capito, and then we'll turn to Senator Duckworth, and then depending on who joins us, we'll take it from there. I just want to tell, in baseball, if you a pitcher somehow in delivering a pitch signals what kind of pitch they're throwing, fastball, curveball, slider. You say that the pitcher has telegraphed their pitch. I want to telegraph my pitch to the panel. Probably the last question I ask you is this. One of the things we're pretty good at is Senator Capito and Senator Inhofe, who used to be the chairman of this committee and still a valued senior member, but we're pretty good at finding the middle, finding principled compromises. And Senator Inhofe and I joined together almost every Thursday for half an hour or so at a Bible study. You'd be amazed how many Bible studies and prayer breakfasts there are in Capitol Hill, almost all bipartisan. But one of the things we always pray for, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, is wisdom. Wisdom. One of the things I want to ask you, and I'll be asking you right at the end of this hearing, is where do you agree? Where is there consensus on the key issues before us? Where is this consensus on some of the key sticking points? We look forward to hearing you from on that score. All right, questions. Mr. Cohen, again, thanks for joining us. When the American Nuclear Infrastructure Act was considered by this committee last Congress, I believe you testified that you had concerns regarding the NRC budget cuts and the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act that place caps on the NRC's corporate support spending. The NRC has also expressed concerns to our committee about their ability to continue to meet these caps and the resulting impacts on the NRC's modernization efforts, as these limits are set to become more restrictive over time. Here's my question, and this, again, would be for you, Mr. Cohen. Do you agree with the NRC's assessment that the administrative budget restrictions in the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act ties the hands of the NRC from hiring the best and brightest and could hurt the NRC's ability to keep up with the industry innovations and new technologies? Second half of the question would be, do you still believe we should amend the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, corporate support caps? All right, Mr. Cohen. We can't hear you. Check, I think you're muted. Mr. Cohen, we cannot hear you.
I apologize. Can you hear me now? Okay, very good.
Yes, we can. Start over, please.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we do share the concern that you outlined, that the current budget caps are constraining the NRC's ability to deal with both existing safety issues as well as licensing and reviewing new reactor designs. We've looked at the NRC's submission to this committee and believe that their analysis is correct. And we believe also that this committee should consider modifications, legislative modifications to the cap, at a minimum to provide the NRC with some more flexibility around how the cap is defined with respect to the definition of corporate support, adjustment for inflation, and, for example, removing 2018 as the base year. So anyway, the answer is generally yes. We believe that those caps have been proven to be overly restrictive and could constrain the NRC's ability to be effective.
All right, thanks. Let me also direct my second question to involving advanced reactor deployment. The Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act requires the NRC to develop a new technology-inclusive regulatory framework, as you know, capable of accommodating the diversity of advanced reactor designs by the end of 20 2027. The NRC is expected to finalize this framework not by 2027, but actually I've learned this last week by 2024, about 3 years ahead of the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act's deadlines. And recently, the NRC denied a license application for Oklo Advanced Micro Reactor.